Hi Jay, I'm going to try to do part 2 of your opening of the key reading today. Today is the 6th of January. We'll see if we are allowed back in, so to speak. The last time I tried this was about 2 days ago and it still wouldn't let me in. So we're going to try again today, see what happens. Of course, to refresh, refer back to the first video, but we're going to attempt to ask for the second operation of the opening of the key that we began for you on the 1st of February of this year. I invoke thee, E-A-O, that thou wilt send Heru, the great angel, who art set over the operations of this secret wisdom, that he may lay his hand invisibly upon these consecrated cards of art, and that thereby we may obtain true knowledge of hidden things to the glory of thine ineffable name. Amen. Alright, so of course, again, your significator is going to be the Knight of Discs. Remember, this reading is about the astrological houses. I apologize, I'm in my bathrobe, but my house is really, really cold. Really classy, I know. Okay, we're going to give him a cut to 3 piles arbitrarily. Now we're going to cut them into 12 piles for the astrological houses. Excuse me. I realize it's a little tedious, but there's no other way of doing it. I barely have enough room for this circle, but we'll do our best. Okay, great. So first I'm going to flip them over and we're going to try to find where your significator is, because if the divination is good, we'll continue with it and I'll try to talk to you about, oh, there you are. Okay, so we'll be able to continue with this operation pretty easily. Huh, that's interesting, actually. I wouldn't have thought of that for where you are. But it makes sense. I need more room. I need a bigger table. Okay, so again, these represent the astrological houses. The difference between houses and signs is that, even though they're very similar in nature, a sign really relates to an individual's personality or an aspect or area of one's personality and their behavior, whereas the house is really more the exterior world, the life of that particular person, you know, if we're talking about a specific horoscope. So the houses are really about field of action. So for instance, well, I can just go right on through and tell you what each top card means. Since it's good to talk about all of them, I think, to give you a general idea of what the whole operation is trying to get at. Your first house is over here, and you can't really see it, so I'll show it to you. You have the Princess of Cups on the cover, or on the front. And the first house is the house of the ego, so it's basically areas of life in which you are exercising personal leadership, or you're exercising your sense of self and independence, ego-driven parts of life. So it can be ambitions to some extent. Then your next house, the second house, you have the Knight of Cups. And the second house is related to Taurus, and so it's associated with your material goods, your material possessions, that which you acquire through labor. And you have the Knight of Cups there. Oh, I need to talk about what the, the actual cards are saying, sorry. The Princess of Cups, to backtrack a little bit. The Princess of Cups in terms of how you are expressing yourself in the world, basically, or how you are seeing yourself, basically, is, again, I think the Princess is getting at that sense of general happiness that you're really feeling at the moment, as far as, I think, more relationships are concerned. In the previous reading, we talked about how your relationships are a source of powerful happiness for you, but that they were in some ways debilitating. Sorry, my computer's going to die. Because you're kind of getting stuck by them. And the Princess of Cups can, in some ways, reflect that, I think. The Princess is someone who is still very much trying to figure out how emotions work, but she's a very gentle person. So you in this situation, or in this operation, are being characterized as particularly gentle and wanting to help others, being very generous with your time and your feelings, very compassionate to others. But also, you know, sometimes she can be lazy, as we were talking about in the first one. She can be a little slothful, and she's tough to get motivated. In your second house, which is again the house of your material possessions, you have the Knight of Cups. So perhaps this can represent either, I mean, I could say that it, it might be a specific individual who is connected to your possessions to some extent, to your holdings, to your resources, and if it's a person other than yourself, I would say that they are, well, they're kind of bipolar in some ways. I think they have a lot of concealed frustration. The Knight of Cups is known for that because he's got this fiery element in him, being a knight, but his element is mostly passive, being water. And so he has this kind of emotional complex. So sometimes he's quick to anger, and sometimes he's very good at expressing his emotions, and sometimes he's not. He can be very idealistic and very imaginative, but is sometimes difficult at actually manifesting those imaginations, those fantasies. So sometimes he lives in his head a bit, but he can also be very romantic and very charming, and can be very social and appealing in a lot of different ways. So, you know, that could be a specific individual, you know, your partner or whatever, who shares resources with you and who is a major influence in this situation. The third house is the house of your communications, basically. It's, you know, what's going on in the social sphere around you, I think. And because it's associated with Gemini, and you have the Seven of Swords. So it could represent you know, the Seven of Swords is the Lord of Futility, and just to show you what it looks like. And it might mean that Either other people around you don't seem to show a lot of confidence in you, and that might be part of the problem. Or it could be that I guess, something that you're talking about with others, the way you talk about this situation with others, is kind of negative and kind of a downer. Either they're telling you, like, don't take any risks and, stay where you are, or you're telling other people that, or maybe it's both, But either way, it's kind of a self-defeating card to some extent, because it implies a kind of weakness, a weakness of willpower. But while I said it's self-defeating, it's not necessarily. It can also be because of the influence of others, and I think that might be more relevant here given the house that it's in. Okay. The pile that you are in is the fourth house, which is the house of Cancer. And the fourth house is about one's domestic life. It's about one's private life, their home life, their family life, that sort of thing. So you're very centered there. That's where you are operating from in this situation and where the situation is going to unfold next. Okay. The next house is the fifth house, the house of Leo, and is associated with, it's usually associated with one's creative side, but basically the areas in life in which one is very impassioned or creative, that sort of thing, basically. And you have the Four of Swords, so this tells me that there's this kind of break that is developing on your creative side, basically, your sense of independent creativity. And maybe this is another reason why you're starting to feel very bored and unhappy with your job where it is at the moment in your career. Okay, because there's this kind of pause button that's been placed on it, on your sense of agency, I think. The next house is the sixth house, the house of Virgo, and this is the house that describes, I think, it can be the house that describes our health and our body, basically sometimes it can be the field of our habitual lives, which is funny because that's more associated with Taurus, but I do think because it's associated very much with the body and health and one's physical condition, that it can relate to our habits and behaviors as well. And you have adjustment, otherwise known as justice. So it may be that you're going to have to put in check certain things that you're used to doing, that you're going to have to readjust them, basically, and recalculate them to fit the growing situation. In the previous operation, we talked about how death was very relevant and how it was connected to maybe letting go of behaviors that you do related to money that might be either costly or not irresponsible. And so perhaps this is, having to deal with that. And trying to get things back on the right track, certainly, and trying to be a lot more practical about things, that this is what you need to do. Whether you actually do it is sort of up for debate, because it's not wonderfully aspected there, but it's still there nonetheless. The eighth house is the house of Libra, which is adjustment, actually. Libra and adjustment represent basically the same idea. But it's about balance. It's this the house that represents our partnerships with people, our intimate connections with people, like confidants and that sort of thing. And you have the Five of Cups, which is interesting. It may mean that that despite how happy you are or seemingly are for now in your relationship, that there might become elements of it that turn sour. Or and it's more as a motivator, I think. It's more as a necessary motivator to make you realize that there's more to life out there than your domestic life and your relationships, that really there's still an active life that you need to be living. Okay? It doesn't necessarily mean that your relationship is going to end by any means, but it might start to become less, fantastical, to be honest. The next house is the 8th house. This is the house of Scorpio, which describes things that one inherits, which is interesting because it is a house associated with death and kind of sexuality, but it's also opposite Taurus, the second house over here, that talks about one's personal possessions. So the second house really talks about the possessions that one makes for oneself, and Scorpio, the 8th house here, talks more about either things that you need to let go of or things that you're going to inherit from other people who are letting go to some extent, possibly dying. But that doesn't really seem to be indicated here. We have the Hierophant. And I think this is either, well, I want to say that this is connected to what we've been talking about as far as death is concerned. The Hierophant, being Taurus, is often associated with habits and behavior and reinforced modes of looking at the world. And I think that this is something that is going to certainly be going through a transition as you deal with this situation. The 9th house, the house of Sagittarius, the house of travel and exploration and spirituality, you have the 7 of Cups, which is, again, this sort of unwillingness to leave your position in any way, shape, or form, your unwillingness to move either to explore new territory or to really follow your heart's desire, to be honest. So there's, and again, the 7 of Cups is very similar to the Princess of Cups in that they both have this kind of lethargicness, or rather lethargy is the word I'm actually looking for, about them. So this is something that you're going to want to be careful of. It says that you're going to become, or that this sort of slothfulness is going to continue and prevent you from really going places that you could be exploring. The 10th house is the house of Capricorn. It is the house that describes your appearance to others, your dealings with others as far as career mostly is concerned, I suppose, yeah, it's basically the house that's associated with your notoriety, how other people look up to you or not. And you have the Tower, which represents usually an unexpected blow, and sometimes it's an unexpected blow to one's ego. It could mean that this is definitely something to look out for as far as career is concerned. It sort of is telling you that, whether you want a change to happen or not, it might come your way, and that it may come from other people. I don't know if it represents being let go, per se. It could. There is some kind of... I'm not getting a particularly great vibe from this card. Its destructive element feels kind of strong right now. Given the rest of the reading, I think that this is also kind of necessary if you continue the way you've been going. So this is definitely something that we need to act on soon. The 11th house is the house of Aquarius, the house that describes one's connections to other people, one's, like teams, groups, associations, like even religious groups or companies that one belongs to, political parties. It's all about group cohesion and one's role in a group. And you have the 8 of Pentacles, or 8 of Discs, rather. And that's kind of interesting. I think we could say that... actually, I'm not really sure what I want to say about that. It's really, really interesting. It may represent needing to invest in a new company. After whatever happens in the tower, you might need to realign yourself and get yourself back on track. That you might need to go through a rebuilding process and kind of change your goals. Okay. The last house, the 12th house, is the house of Pisces and describes one's, I think it basically describes one's, the realm of one's dreams and one's subconscious, the realm of things that that you don't really know about. Sort of that which is hidden from you. And you have the Ace of Swords. And again, I think this is sort of what I was just talking about in that, whatever these seemingly bad things are in this, that they're all part of the solution, that they're kind of necessary, and they're meant to be taken as learning experiences, and they're meant to be taken as motivators to get you in conceivably a better, happier place than you are now, or at least a more comfortable place, because I know you're probably thinking like, well, I already am happy, but again, putting together what we've been talking about, it says that happiness is again debilitating. So be careful. That this partially explains why you've been feeling this kind of ennui, this unsettlement about what you're doing and what you should be doing. Okay, so let's finally read the pile you're in, which is the 4th house. Remember, the house of Cancer, the house of your personal life, your home life, your domestic life, etc. We'll get rid of all the other piles. Okay, so the Knight of Discs is right on the front, and so we see that you are very much engaged in domestic life in this operation. This is supposed to represent the development of the question, of course, the next chapter of the story, so to speak, after the first operation. So we have you starting off here, surrounded by the Princess of Swords and the Moon. So there's general unsettlement in your in your future. There's this unease. Both of those cards surrounding you describe wariness of the unknown and uncertainty. And this may even describe how you're going to react to this reading, some of the more potentially troubling parts of it, that, again, are not meant to trouble you, I think. That's definitely something you want to keep in mind as you digest this reading, is that it's not meant necessarily to scare you, it's meant to nudge you into reevaluating and acting and making decisions that are for your benefit, ultimately. Okay, so again, just this general unease and kind of fear in both of these cards. Okay, we're going to count to the right for you again because you're looking to the right. 1, 2, 3, 4. And from there you've hit the Sun. So it seems that, it actually ends up okay, that there's this idea of tremendous success that somehow comes from this. And part of it is just, an act of patience and strength, really. You have the 9 of Wands and the 9 of Cups next to the Sun, and so even though the Sun is the dominant card there, you also have these ideas of very deep happiness, or an idea of what deep happiness really is, coupled with tremendous fortitude and endurance. So it's kind of like the idea that if you really dig deep and really work for the long term in dealing with this issue, you can conceivably get a pretty great solution for yourself because it engages yourself more in what you're doing in your life in general. From the Sun, we are going to count 9. 2, 3, 4, 5. And we hit the 9 of Swords. This reinforces the idea that it is going to be a struggle, that it is going to be difficult, that it's not exactly going to be a straight and narrow path, that it's going to have curves and bumps. That definitely one of the issues here is going to be, I think, your lack of self-confidence and your general anxiety about the whole situation. This is definitely talking about, your discomfort in this situation, because there's a lot of uncertainty to it, and because you don't want to disturb the comfort that you've attained for yourself domestically. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. We have a lot of the number 9 in this, which is interesting. From there we hit the 9 of Swords, and it tells me that you're going to be definitely distressed by the length of time that is going into this. That the solution is not going to necessarily present itself right away, and this is going to make you even further nervous, or even more nervous, rather. And then you might start to blame yourself to some extent. You might start to think that you're doing something wrong, or that the situation just doesn't feel right. And again, this is talking about your domestic life. So it's kind of saying, well, I'm going to wrap it up and then I'll conclude, I think. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Then we have the Princess of Swords. Again, you have all these cards of general anxiety, really just anxiety and agitation. The Princess of Swords, the 9 of Swords, the 9 of Wands, and the Moon are 4 cards out of 7 that are particularly nervous and kind of fearful. The 9 of Wands, not so much, but certainly the other 3. But here we have the Princess of Swords again, possibly even getting argumentative. There may be some confrontations that arise in the future in your home life because of your general frustration at the situation, perhaps frustration with your own self, that might cause you to lash out in ways that perhaps you don't even expect yourself to. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and then we hit the 9 of Swords again. So I think this just warns us, just by counting it, that definitely in your future, again, that sort of quiet happiness that we have in your relationship, that you don't really want to disturb, may get disturbed anyway. That basically, just because you need to move beyond it to some extent, and be willing to push yourself into different fields that might be more risky, that you might invert some of that, or rather transmit some of that frustration with yourself onto other people, particularly your loved ones. Okay, so technically, well, pairing, I'm going to pair just a little differently, for kicks, really. We're going to pair from the Princess. Okay, so we're going to just say you're here, and we're going to pair like this. The Moon and the Princess of Swords. Again, this is very much about this idea of distress about the unknown. It seems it's sort of like you are going to feel like you're very much on the brink of a transition, and you're not sure what that transition is going to hold. You're going to feel kind of lost in the situation and unsure of yourself. And again, it might cause you to just, again, be kind of agitated at other people and frustrated at the situation, certainly. Oh, sorry, Steve. Oh. You have the 9 of, then we have the 9 of Cups and the 9 of Swords. This again is sort of the corruption, I think, of this wonderful happiness that you think you have. That again, it might turn sour a little bit. That that arguments might be in your future about certain things, about your respective life paths. The Nine of Swords can represent harsh words to some extent. And lastly, we have the Sun and the Strength. So it says that you're going to stick it out, however, that you're going to endure, that whatever problems arise in your relationship, you'll be able to overcome them, and you will definitely manage to hold on to some success there. The good thing about this, I think, is the Sun's influence tells us that, again, those bumps are supposed to be motivators for you. So whatever bumps happen in your relationship in the future, take them seriously in the fact that they're meant to happen in order to give you more leeway. I think right now, again, your relationship is very restricting, and I think perhaps by going through some of these growing pains, you might be able to. It says that you'll be able to give yourself a lot more liberty, and a lot more personal success, which is very important given this situation. Okay, so that's the end of the second operation. I will next try to do the third operation. We'll see if we can get into that today as well. Alright, I hope you found this useful and that it wasn't too confusing or anything like that. Excuse me. And I will see you for Operation 3. Thank you very much.